Hi, welcome to NUR 303 Pathophysiology. This is part 2 of sensory function, chapter 14. We're going to talk about more about the eyes and the ears and other organs in the sensory function in this portion of the lecture. So the eyes perceive the environment. The sclera is white area. The cornea is a lens on the anterior surface. The choroid is the middle layer of the eye, which contains melanin to absorb stray light. The ciliary body is the anterior portion of the choroid, which contains smooth muscle fibers that control the shape of the lens and focus on incoming light. The iris is the colored portion, and the pupil is the dark opening in the center of the iris. This should all kind of be review for you. The retina is the innermost portion of the eye. It's weakly attached. I have it right here. See how it's, so you can see where the choroid is in the retina. Weakly attached to the choroid, making it vulnerable to damage, and we'll talk about that with pathology. Contains an outer pigmented layer and an inner layer consisting of photoreceptors. And the photoreceptors and nerve cells. And this is a portion here. There are two types of photoreceptors. There's rods, and I have them right here, are sensitive to low light and function at night, and the cones only operate in bright light and are responsible for visual acuity and color vision. And I put circled right here over by the optic nerve, and that's the optic disc, and there's no photoreceptors there. And there's another slide here, upcoming slide. So the optic nerve moving along is formed from the axons and the ganglion cells at the back of the eye, and this contains no photoreceptors, as I said before, and insensitive to light. The visual images, you've heard this before, but visual images cast upside down into the retina, and impulses transmitted then to the brain. So moving along, the lens is a transparent, flexible structure behind the iris, and the lens is right here. The anterior chamber is in the front of the lens, and the posterior is behind. The aqueous humor, water, liquid in the anterior humor, it says right here, anterior chamber that provides nutrients to the cornea and lens and carries away cellular waste products. And then there's the vitreous humor, and that's in this section here. It's a clear gelatinous material that fills the posterior chamber. The conjunctiva, which isn't pictured in this slide, is a fragile membrane that covers the inner surface of the eyelid and the exposed surface of the eye. The lacrimal gland keeps the surface moist. Blinking clears the eye by sweeping the fluid. Tears drain on the inner side through the two lacrimal ducts. In this picture here, you can see the lacrimal ducts. You can see here the lens, the anterior chamber, the aqueous humor in here. You can see the optic disc and the nerves. And I want you to bring to your attention to the two lateral and medial muscles that move the eye, and then the retinas right here too. So this is another good picture here, and you can see the same structures as in the picture before, and you can see here, but they have a picture of the conjunctiva up here as well. And again, the muscles are up here, up in here and down here, and then optic nerve, and again a good picture of the choroid next to the retina next to the choroid. I want to just talk 2 seconds to just kind of bring it back to cranial nerves and all that, because it's pretty important when you start talking about the eyes and the ears about cranial nerves, because the cranial nerves have a lot to there's nerves that are associated. And one of them is the oculomotor, and the oculomotor I put up here is charged with the task of pupillary constriction and following moving objects. We test that when we use our pen lights in the health sciences. Cranial nerve 4 is the trochlear nerve, and that's charged with extraocular eye movement and following movements. And then the abducens is lateral eye movement. And so you can follow these down and then see each one of these cranial nerves. Okay, so move on to the ears. They detect and process sound, detect body position, and maintain balance. The outer ear is the auricle or pinna, and then the earlobe, the external canal here, and this depicts each section here. The middle ear here is the tympanic membrane, which is right here, and the ossicles, which are right in here, all those little bones. And then the inner ear is the cochlea, which is right here, the semilunar canals, and the saccule, and the auricle. And you can see those. I mean, you can't see, they're not pictured here, but that's the external, middle, and inner ear. Now, the way sound is transmitted, it enters through the auricle and then travels down the canal, and then the external ear canal until it reaches the tympanic membrane or eardrum. The sound hits the tympanic membrane, creating vibrations. And then we move on to the next slide. The vibrations transmit from the membrane to the ossicles, the malleus, see it's labeled here, malleus, incus, and staples, called the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. The malleus lies near the tympanic membrane, and the vibrations from the membrane cause the malleus to rock back and forth. This rocking causes the incus to vibrate, which in turn causes the staples to move. You can see that here. The staples is right here. To move in and out against the oval window, an opening in the inner ear covered with a membrane. And then the vibrations created through the membrane amplify as they are transmitted through the inner ear, which of course is the inner ears here and these structures in here. The movement, and there's a good picture in your book about this, the movement of the oval window causes fluid within the cochlea over here to vibrate, creating waves. The organ of Corti, which is, there's a good discussion about this in your book, as I said, contains the hearing receptors and the hair cells, and vibrations of the organ of Corti stimulate hair movement. The dendrites wrap the bases of these cells, and the hair movement causes the dendrites to form nerve impulses that travel then to the brain via the vestibule cochlear nerve, which is cranial nerve number 8. And see, it's the vestibule nerve and the cochlear nerve that kind of join, and it's in here, it's called the acoustic nerve, and that's 8, but over its vestibule, the vestibulocochlear nerve, cranial nerve number 8. And you can see that right here. Okay? So it's the vestibular nerve, the cochlear nerve, and they join together to form the vestibulocochlear nerve, cranial nerve. So what is position and balance then all about? Well, the vestibular apparatus, which is located in the inner ear, is in charge of that. There's 2 parts of it. There's the semilunar canals, which are 3 ring-like fluid structures here that house the receptors for the position, body, and movement. The fluid movement stimulates dendrites to send impulses to the brain to report the movement. And so that's what the semicircular canals are all about. The vestibule is a bony chamber positioned between the cochlea and the semicircular canals. And that houses the receptors that respond to the body position and movement. So there's the vestibular nerve in here. Okay? And this is the in the vestibule here. So what's the eustachian tube? Well, that's located also in the inner ear and opens into the pharynx. And we all have heard of the eustachian tubes. It's right here. Okay? And it acts as a pressure valve. Normally the tube remains open, but occasionally it can, have a problem and constrict. It may become open with activities such as yawning and swallowing. Opening the eustachian tube allows air to flow in and out of the middle ear, equalizing the internal and external pressure on the tympanic membrane. So it equalizes the pressure. So that's when you yawn, or when there's pressurizing problems, when you're in elevated atmospheric conditions, like in airplanes. That's when you yawn, and it kind of equalizes the pressure of the tympanic membrane against the tympanic membrane. So aging and hearing loss. Well, there's hearing. Well, the hearing is affected in about 33% of all older people. And there's a term called presbycusis. Presbycusis is a term that's described degenerative hearing loss that occurs with advancing age. And there's a few reasons that you don't necessarily have to memorize these, other than knowing that cochlear hair cell degeneration, there's an inability to hear high frequency sounds, and high frequency sounds like escaping steam, turn signals, things like that. And then there's loss of auditory neurons in the spiral ganglia, the chordae, that we talked about a couple of slides ago. That's the inability, causes the inability to hear high frequency sounds as well. And then there's some degeneration of the basilar conductive membrane of the cochlea, and all frequencies are affected there. There's decreased vascularity, all kind of things that you would kind of expect. I mean, with the aging body, everything kind of decreases in function. All frequencies and localization of sound. There's loss of cortical auditory neurons. Again, all frequencies and localization of the sound. And so this presbycusis is, something that just normally happens. Now, what we can do as healthcare providers is, because there's inability to hear high frequency sounds sometimes, and also all frequencies, when you're dealing with someone and they're dealing with some sort of hearing loss, what you can do is, speech is generally dealt with when you don't necessarily raise your voice when you're talking to the people. You should speak slowly, using a slightly lower tone, and face them. And so just raising your voice doesn't necessarily make them hear better. It's slowing down and using a lower toned voice. Now, I wanted to bring your attention to also some drugs that are prescribed or in the hospital or whatever. They're called ototoxic. And I'm just bringing this to your attention a little bit because some of these drugs are antibiotics, which include things like gentamicin and vancomycin, which are pretty high-powered antibiotics. And also diuretics may cause some kind of tinnitus, which can be followed by permanent hearing loss. So what's olfaction then? Well, this is the function of smell, and it's really the function of cranial nerve number 1. And there's a strong relationship between taste, which is gustation, and smell. And there's a few stimulants of olfaction, but we're not going to talk about them. They're just camphoraceous, musky, floral, peppermint, ethereal, and pungent and putrid. And those are the smell olfactory stimulants. And then there's taste, and that's charged by cranial nerve number 7 and part of number 9. And nerves in the tongue, there's nerves in the tongue, soft palate, uvula, pharynx, and upper esophagus. And the gustatory stimulants would include sour, sweet, salty, and bitter, all parts of your tongue that may pretty much probably be familiar with you, all these different parts of your tongue that are the gustatory stimulants. Now, there's a few words I want you to know, and that one of them is hyposmia, and that's impaired sense of smell. Anosmia, which is a loss of sense of smell, which can be kind of and dangerous because we rely on our olfactory sense more than maybe you realize, in that it really is a danger sensing organ. And for example, if you don't smell fire, then you don't know the fire is near. You can't smell if food is spoiled. And there's a lot of, it's just not for pleasure. It's also for a danger, a warning signal as well. And I also want to bring your attention to the word when we talk about when anosmia is a loss of sense of smell, you'll notice that is usually a loss of, or something, something's not there, like anuric means there's no urine. Anosmia, loss of sense of smell. And also hypo, again, just to reiterate, hypo means less than, hyper is more than. So olfactory hallucinations are smell that is not really present. Parosmia is an abnormal sense of smell. Taste dysfunction. Now there's some terms here. Hypogenusia is a decrease in taste. Agenusia is the absence of sense of taste and create some cranial damage with the sense of taste. Paragenusia is an abnormal sense of taste. And some age-related olfaction and taste changes. Well, olfaction would be there would be a decline in the odor sensitivity, a loss of olfactory sensory neurons and cells in the olfactory bulbs, and causes diminished appetite and food selection, which can kind of be a problem if with older individual that is charged with, or not charged with, but with appetite in maintaining their weight to maintain health. So loss of olfaction can be problematic because in your diminished appetite and such. And then taste, there's a decline in a higher concentration of flavors is required because there's a decline, and there's a decline in taste sensitivity. And again, when there's a decline in taste sensitivity and higher concentrations are needed for the flavor to taste good, then that would affect the desire to eat efficiently, or sufficiently, I should say. And just know that the nose and the mouth work closely together to realize taste as well. Now let's move on a little bit to touch. Touch is the sensation that involves modality, intensity, location, and duration. There's receptors that are present in the skin. Again, we'll talk about just proprioception. That's the sense of body position. And this really just depends on the inner ear, vision, and receptors in the joints and ligament. And again, when we talk about proprioception, there's a lot of disease, pathophysiological things that happen that can affect proprioception. And the one that I always target is CVAs that or strokes, cerebral vascular accidents that affect or can affect the sense of body position, proprioception. Proprioception dysfunctions can also, there's a few pathologies. One of is vestibular nystagmus, and this is constant involuntary movement of the eyeballs. And you can understand if your proprioception is dependent on vision, then if there's constant involuntary movement, nystagmus, then that would be a problem and cause proprioceptive dysfunction. Vertigo, which is the sensation of spinning, and can be caused by an inflammation of the semicircular canals in the ear, that can also have cause proprioceptive dysfunction. And then Meniere's disease, which is a loss of proprioception. And this is a disease that causes loss of proprioception, and we'll talk about that in the next, the part 3, or the next dysfunction of sensory in this chapter or week. And that's it.